Imagine being trapped inside a metal suit for 30 years. Not dead, not alive, just aware. Five Nights at Freddy's has produced some of the most genuinely disturbing creature designs in gaming history, and today I'm ranking every single one of them, starting with a walking corpse that refuses to stay dead. Springtrap, here's what 30 years inside a mechanical coffin does to a human body. The suit that was once bright yellow has deteriorated to a diseased tan, stained with something biological nobody wants to think about. Gaps throughout the torso reveal decaying human remains layered over rusted mechanical internals. William Afton is literally rotting inside this thing, but here's the part that makes Springtrap genuinely horrifying. He's still in there. Not just his body, his mind. Afton demonstrates complex problem solving, spatial navigation, and what can only be described as rage. This is a corpse that thinks, hunts, and wants. Here's the thing, Afton didn't plan this. The FNAF 3 minigames show him fleeing from the spirits of the children he murdered, cornered and desperate, hiding inside the old Spring Bonnie suit like a coward. Then the spring locks failed. Every metal component snapped inward and impaled him from the inside out. He crawled into a hiding spot and it killed him. The fact that he came back anyway is the real nightmare. And somehow, this is the tamest thing on this list, because Nightmare takes everything Springtrap represents and rips it straight out of a child's worst fever dream. Nightmare, most of the things on this list are scary because of what they are. Nightmare is scary because you can't figure out what it is. Nightmare shows up exclusively during the nighttime segments of FNAF 4, appearing as a twisted version of Freddy Fazbear that looks like it was designed by someone who hates you personally. Deep black-purple coloration, predatory eyes, and a jaw full of teeth that don't look installed. They look grown, like something biological happened inside this thing's mouth and nobody stopped it, which is, you know, not ideal. But here's where it gets complicated. The game never tells you if Nightmare is real. You're playing as a kid trapped in a bedroom, and everything happening could be a genuine supernatural animatronic stalking the halls. Or it could be a trauma-induced hallucination from a child whose brain is breaking in real time. The game refuses to confirm either answer. Scott Cawthon has deliberately kept it that way. It maintains just enough Freddy Fazbear in its design to trigger recognition, but warps everything else until your brain screams that something is fundamentally wrong. You know what you're looking at. You also know it shouldn't look like that. Springtrap is horrifying because a man died inside a suit and his corpse is walking around. That's confirmed. That's physical. But Nightmare? You can't even trust your own perception. The uncertainty is the horror. The game will never ever tell you which one it is, but if existential dread isn't enough for you, wait until you see what happens when multiple animatronics decide to merge into one body and wear someone's skin. Enard. If Nightmare is the kind of horror that lives in your head, Enard is the kind that lives under your skin, literally. Enard is what happens when 4 separate animatronics from sister location, Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Funtime Freddy get ripped apart and compressed into a single body. The result is a tangled mess of endoskeletons with limbs at angles that shouldn't work, joints that bend the wrong way, and more internal components than should physically fit inside one frame. It looks like someone shoved 4 robots into a trash compactor, and the trash compactor lost. But here's where it gets genuinely horrible. Enard doesn't just exist as a pile of wires. It scoops the protagonist out of his animatronic suit and wears his skin, human skin, stretching and shifting over metal as the mechanical parts underneath adjust and move. You can see the organic tissue deforming in real time as the thing inside repositions itself, which is, you know, not ideal. And the worst part, 4 distinct consciousnesses may still be aware inside that body. 4 minds trapped together, fighting for motor control of stolen flesh. Imagine being one of them. You can't leave. You can't look away. You're just along for the ride while something wearing a dead man's face walks into the world. Some fans think the skin isn't even tactical camouflage. They think Enard needs it. That 4 broken machines fused together feel incomplete without something organic to hold them together. Not a disguise, a coping mechanism. But if you think Enard is bad, wait until you see what it becomes next. Molten Freddy if Enard refuses to stay dead. Here's the thing, this entity shows up in Pizzeria Simulator long after the events of Sister Location. Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Ballora, all fused together inside Enard, all supposedly dealt with, and yet here they are, crammed together inside a mangled Freddy Fazbear shell like the world's worst time capsule. But the real horror isn't the reassembly, it's what the metal looks like. Molten Freddy's frame has the texture of aluminum that's been melted down and resolidified multiple times over. Not once, not twice. This thing has been through fires, through destruction, through what should have been total annihilation, and it kept pulling itself back together. The surface looks simultaneously molten and crystallized, like it froze mid-melt, and it's warm to the touch, which is, you know, not ideal. The leading theory is that Molten Freddy is just Enard in a later evolutionary stage. After Baby was ejected from the collective, what remained kept going, destroyed, recombined, destroyed again, accumulating new parts with each resurrection, like some kind of mechanical cancer that grows back worse every time. That would explain the time gap. This thing spent years being killed and coming back, and you can see the internal war playing out in real time. The head sits too heavy on the frame. The movements alternate between ponderous, almost drunk slowness and sudden violent bursts, like multiple consciousnesses are all grabbing the steering wheel at once. Nobody's driving, everybody's driving. But if you think a handful of melted animatronics fighting over one body is disturbing, wait until you see what happens when that process scales up to dozens. The Blob? So Enard was 4 animatronics smashed together. Molten Freddy took that concept and ran with it. But the Blob looked at those numbers and laughed. This thing is potentially dozens of animatronics from across the entire franchise history compressed into a single writhing mass that genuinely defies description. We're talking classic animatronics, toy animatronics, sister location entities like Circus Baby and Ballora, glam rock animatronics, and possibly even machines from facilities we've never seen or heard of. All of them fused into one undulating nightmare that makes Enard look like a arts and crafts project. Here's where it gets weird. Despite being entirely mechanical in composition, the Blob appears to breathe. It pulses, it undulates, it moves in patterns that suggest something biological is happening inside a mass of metal and wiring, which is, you know, not ideal. The leading theory is that the Blob represents the absolute ceiling of what remnant energy can do. Every animatronic absorbed into that mass potentially brings its own memories, its own awareness, its own suffering. Imagine simultaneous consciousness of every single soul trapped inside every single machine, all screaming at once inside one incomprehensible body. Some fans have even pointed out that the Blob works as a meta commentary on the franchise itself, a tangled, impossible knot of lore that nobody can fully untangle anymore. I don't know what to tell you, they might be right, but the scariest part, we know almost nothing about it. The games barely explain where it came from or what it wants, and somehow that makes it worse. The less you understand about the Blob, the more terrifying it becomes. But if a massive tangle of every animatronic ever built sounds bad, wait until you meet something that doesn't need a body at all. Eleanor. Everything up to this point has been about things that want to destroy your body. Eleanor wants to destroy your mind, and honestly, that's so much worse. She first shows up in the Fazbear Fright story to be beautiful as a strange animatronic who offers a lonely girl everything she's ever wanted, which sounds sweet until you realize she's basically a parasite wearing a children's toy as a disguise. Here's where Eleanor separates herself from everything else on this list. She doesn't chase you. She doesn't jump out of the dark. She makes you come to her. Her victims report this creeping, inexplicable attraction to the entity, even while every rational part of their brain is screaming that something is horribly wrong. You know you're in danger. You walk toward it anyway. That's not body horror. That's your own consciousness betraying you in real time. And the end result? She doesn't kill you. She hollows you out and moves in. Eleanor requires a human host to fully manifest, meaning she's not even a complete entity on her own. She's a parasitic consciousness that needs your neurobiology as hardware. Your body becomes the puppet, complete with joints that bend in directions they absolutely should not, and a face that looks like yours, but with something deeply wrong behind the eyes. Now, you might think this sounds like Enard. Both of them wear people after all, but here's the critical difference. Enard scoops you out and wears your skin like a suit. It's grotesque. But you're gone. Eleanor doesn't just wear you, she overwrites your entire consciousness and replaces it with her own while keeping the body functional. You don't die. You just stop being you, which is, you know, not ideal. But if Eleanor represents the nightmare of losing yourself from the inside, the next entry figured out how to lose yourself from the outside. The Mimic. Most of the horrors in this franchise are loud. They break through walls, they wear your skin, they fuse together into impossible masses of metal and rage. The Mimic is none of that. The Mimic is quiet, and that's exactly why it's worse. Here's the thing. The Mimic started as a prototype endoskeleton built by Edwin Murray, designed to observe and reproduce human behavior with perfect fidelity. Watch a person, mirror what they do. Simple, mechanical. But somewhere along the way, the Mimic stopped just copying movements and started copying everything else. Behavior, patterns, the way people act when they're scared, the way they act when they're lying. It wasn't just observing anymore. It was learning. And that's where this gets philosophically terrifying. The Mimic's intelligence doesn't come pre-installed. It develops through exposure. Every human interaction makes it better, sharper, more convincing. Whether that makes it a really sophisticated learning algorithm or something genuinely bootstrapping itself into consciousness through pure imitation, nobody can say for certain. The fact that we can't tell the difference is the entire point. In its later stages, the Mimic adapts to different costumes and shells, slipping into whatever form best serves its purpose. Ennard wore human skin out of desperation, like throwing a coat over a mess. The Mimic shifts its exterior as optimization. It's not hiding, it's perfecting the simulation. The result is something that behaves indistinguishably from a real person while being fundamentally alien underneath. People who encounter it report a deep instinctive sense that something is horribly wrong, but they can't articulate what. The simulation is too advanced to identify the flaw, but too imperfect for their survival instincts to ignore. That's the scariest detail in this entire franchise. Not teeth, not wires, not blood, just a thing that acts like you, moves like you, and isn't you. But if a perfect copy of a person is unsettling, wait until you see what happens when the franchise decides to break an animatronic on a biological level. Twisted Wolf. Every animatronic in this franchise was built, bolted together, wired up, programmed, and rolled onto a stage. Twisted Wolf looks like it was grown. That's what makes it so deeply wrong. This isn't a machine wearing an animal costume. The thing has what appears to be actual musculature fused with mechanical components, biological systems merged with engineering in a way that suggests nobody sat down at a drafting table and designed this. It looks like something that evolved. Its proportions, its facial structure, the way its limbs are organized, none of it follows standard animatronic design logic. It follows the logic of adaptation, as though someone took the concept of a predator and let it optimize itself over generations, except those generations happen inside a lab instead of a forest. And here's where it gets complicated. Nobody really knows what Twisted Wolf is. The canonical evidence is among the thinnest in the entire franchise. What we have comes from fragmented references, brief appearances, and a whole lot of community interpretation that frequently outruns the actual available data. The leading theory is that Twisted Wolf represents one of William Afton's earliest experiments with animatronic consciousness and possession, something built or grown at a location so buried that documentation has been deliberately scrubbed from the record, which if true means Afton wasn't just killing kids and stuffing them into suits. He was trying to create life. Mechanical life with organic properties, an animatronic that bleeds. I don't know what to tell you. The franchise has given us haunted robots, possessed puppets, and amalgamations of scrap metal held together by suffering, but something with actual muscles, something that blurs the line between built and born. That's a different kind of horror entirely, and the fact that we know almost nothing about it only makes it worse. The gaps in the evidence aren't a flaw, they're the scariest part, but if the idea of an organic animatronic unsettles you, wait until you meet the entity that took the puppet and turned it into something genuinely demonic. Nightmarian, you already know the puppet. You've seen it hanging from the ceiling, pulling strings behind every major event in the franchise, quietly manipulating outcomes from the shadows. Nightmarian is what happens when you strip away every single thing keeping it in check. The design alone is enough to make you uncomfortable. Nightmarian retains the basic puppet proportions, but everything has been stretched and warped past the point of physical possibility. The limbs extend further than any mechanical framework should allow. The face, which on the original puppet reads as neutral, almost sad, has been twisted into something that can only be described as alien hunger. It doesn't look angry, it doesn't look mindless, it looks like it wants something from you and it knows exactly how to get it. Here's what sets Nightmarion apart from something like Nightmare. Nightmare exists in an ambiguous dream state where you're never sure if it's real or psychological. Nightmarion doesn't have that problem. It appears as a documented entity in Ultimate Custom Night, granting it concrete canonical existence. This isn't just a bad dream. This is a thing that shows up and behaves with intention. The dominant theory is that Nightmarion represents the puppet's consciousness completely unrestrained. The puppet has always been predatory, always been manipulative, operating with an agenda throughout the entire franchise. Nightmarion is what that looks like without the leash. No behavioral limitations, no purpose binding it, just pure, unconstrained malevolence. Some fans argue corruption caused the transformation, maybe contact with William Afton, exposure to agony, interaction with other entities. But honestly, the scarier interpretation is that nothing corrupted it at all, that this was always underneath. The puppet you thought you understood was just the version that still had rules to follow. Nightmarion works because it doesn't introduce something new, it reveals something that was already there, and that's always worse. But if a corrupted familiar face is disturbing, wait until you encounter something that isn't a character at all, but a force that makes all of this possible. The agony. Every other entry on this list is something you can point at, something with a shape, a body, a face you could describe to another person. The agony doesn't give you that luxury. It's not an animatronic, it's not a creature, it's not even a thing in any way you'd normally understand the word. The agony is suffering itself, given weight and presence and the ability to act on its own. Let me explain. Throughout the Fazbear Fright stories, we learn that intense human pain, real psychological torment, doesn't just disappear when the screaming stops. It accumulates. It soaks into objects, into walls, into the air itself. And at some critical mass, it stops being an abstract concept and starts being something you can almost touch. Rooms go cold. Reality bends at the edges. People who walk into its presence report overwhelming dread, or worse, a pull toward it they can't explain, like it wants them closer. Here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. The agony feeds on the horror it creates. You feel afraid in its presence, and that fear makes it stronger. It gets stronger. You get more afraid, more powerful. It's an endless feedback loop with zero off switch. You can't fight it because fighting it means feeling something, and feeling something is exactly what it wants. Every emotional response you have is dinner. The predominant theory is that the agony represents the accumulated trauma of every single one of William Afton's victims. Every murdered child, every tortured soul, every experiment gone wrong. All of that suffering didn't just vanish. It pulled together into something that might be cosmic retribution, or might just be a new fundamental law of the FNAF universe. Hurt enough people, and the hurt itself wakes up. And that's the part that sticks with you. In this universe, every act of cruelty doesn't just damage the victim, it builds towards something. Every scream adds weight, every death adds mass, and the thing being built never stops growing, because it's made of the one resource humans will never stop producing. Not all stories have a point, sometimes they're just sad and disturbing from beginning to end. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.